do Olivia Pope, the shopaholic, and Deadpool have in common, aside from their snazzy wardrobes? Stay tuned and I'll tell you all about it. Hey, Future Bestsellers, Lisa Daly here. I'm the best-selling traditionally published author of 8 books. And if you want to write a book you're super proud of and get it published, this is the channel for you. Today, we are going to talk all about antiheroes. What is an antihero? An antihero is a morally challenged protagonist who sometimes does the right thing and sometimes for the right reason, but not always. Basically, an antihero is the hero of your story, except without all the things you'd normally associate with a hero, like morality, courage, or a chiseled jawline. And if you're into reading romance, you probably already know the antihero. You would just refer to him as the bad boy. Would an antihero by any other name still make your toes curl? Why, yes. Yes, he would. So today we're going to talk about 3 of my very favorite types of antiheroes. Number 1, the classic antihero. When we think of classic heroes, we think handsome, brave, and always on the side of good. Guys like Superman and James Bond and George Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life. You know, they're great looking, they're brave, they're always on the side of good. And the classic anti-hero is basically the opposite of that. They're weak, they're neurotic, they're fearful, and they could be stuffed into a locker pretty much at any time. But ultimately, the anti-hero conquers their own shortcomings or deficiencies, joins the fight, and wins out over the bad guy. One example of the classic anti-hero is the rat from Ratatouille. Here we have a rat who really wants to be a chef. He's earnest in his desire to become the greatest chef of all time, but he ends up getting everybody around him who believes in him fired. He is still a rat, and nobody likes rats in the kitchen, but he is able to overcome all of these deficiencies and ultimately wins the day. Becky Bloomwood, the main character in Sophie Kinsella's Shopaholic series, is probably one of my favorite antiheroes of all time. Becky Bloomwood seems like a classic heroine in the fact that she is beautiful, she's well dressed, she charms the hell out of everybody around her, but she's actually an anti-heroine, and here's why. Her self-esteem is in the toilet, and she is basically up to her eyeballs in debt, which causes her to lie to everybody around her, everyone that she cares about, in order to keep up this persona. Eventually, Becky is able to overcome all the parts of her personality that are holding her back, and eventually she finds redemption. Number 2, the unscrupulous antihero. So while the unscrupulous antihero may have good intentions, they have a funny way of expressing them. Yes, they will definitely take down the bad guy, and you can count on them for that. But they will do anything and everything to get that done. And sometimes those things are not so great. And what's more, they will definitely enjoy it. And in many cases, there will be blood. One of my very favorite unscrupulous antiheroes or antiheroines is Olivia Pope from Scandal. Olivia Pope is a DC fixer who will pretty much do anything and everything, from election fixing to, straight up murder, to keep her friends, coworkers, and clients out of trouble. But sometimes she feels really bad about it, but not usually. Another one of my favorite anti-heroes is Annalise Keating from How to Get Away with Murder. I think it's interesting that both of my 2 favorite unscrupulous anti-heroes were created by Shonda Rhimes, who is absolutely phenomenal, as most of you know. So Annalise Keating is this extremely talented law professor. She's an attorney. She takes all these tough cases and she wins. And she is terrifying to her students and her peers. Terrifying and revered, but mostly terrifying. So she's ruthless. Her methods are often psychopathic. There are lots of dead bodies around. That's never good. But ultimately, her goal is to protect the people she cares about, protect her students, protect the people around her. And finally, there's Deadpool, who is really the perfect example of the unscrupulous anti-hero. Because Deadpool, wants to destroy the bad guy, but he's motivated by revenge and enjoys the carnage. You know, he's willing to take out everybody. He's not, you know, going to worry about a little blood loss on the street. He is going to take out anybody and everybody who gets in his way, and he doesn't care how many bodies are left on the street when he's done. He's also charming, funny, and deeply damaged. Number 3, I think this is my favorite type of anti-hero, the knight in dented armor. Now, this hero knows the difference between right and wrong. They just don't really feel the need to get personally involved. As in, yeah, I'd love to help you save the world and everything, but I think I'm washing my hair that night. The anti-hero will eventually get on board with joining the cause or fighting the bad guy to save the world, but only when the fight starts to affect them personally. So my very favorite knight in dented armor is Don Draper from Mad Men. Now, he looks like a classic hero, right? He's well-dressed, he's got that jawline, he's charming and funny, and I think he'd really love to be seen that way, but he is often cruel to people around him, especially the people who care about him and respect him the most. And ultimately, Don Draper is going to do what Don Draper wants to do. He doesn't have any problem with hurting the people around him to accomplish his goals. So why do we love Don Draper? I think one of the reasons is at some point he really does want to be a better person. He just often falls back into old habits or does things where he's sort of feeding his own insecurities or his own needs. But there are certainly times throughout the series where he was actively trying to be a better person. It doesn't usually stick, but he's trying. And I think another thing that makes that Don Draper character so compelling is that he's so damaged. So what he does is really unexcusable. But through all of the flashbacks throughout the series where you see he grew up in this abusive household and his mother was a prostitute and his stepmother hated him and he was, you know, just tortured and abused throughout his entire life, you really see that just the fact that he can look the part of a good guy, even though he isn't really one inside, you know, is a major accomplishment, at least for a human being. For a character, we want them to be better, to do better. And Don has these flashes where he does actually do the right thing, where he is kind, where he is supportive. I think one of my favorite scenes was early in the series where Peggy has gotten pregnant and she's just given the baby up for adoption, and he not only keeps her job for her, but he visits her in the hospital and he says basically like, this didn't happen and you'll be shocked like by how much this didn't happen. And it was this sort of touching moment where he uses this thing he's been doing all his life, where he's assumed someone else's identity and he's done some pretty unscrupulous things throughout his life. But you also see how he uses that experience of being a not great guy to help someone else who's going through a really traumatic experience. So that's why we love Don Draper. At least that's why I love Don Draper. Also, I think the first sort of knight in dented armor anti-hero that I ever really became aware of was Han Solo from Star Wars. And he is often used as a kind of classic example of that knight in dented armor or reluctant hero. And basically, when we first meet Han Solo, he only gets involved with Luke and Obi-Wan Kenobi for the cash, right? He's just going to take him for the money. But later, he decides to get in on the fight, and he ends up, you know, being a crucial part of helping Luke and the rebels to blow up the Death Star. So he did the right thing. It just took him a while to get there. So this anti-hero video was actually part of a collaboration that was the brainchild of DR Ranger, and I'm going to link to him down below. And some of my favorite author tubers are actually participating in this collaboration, including story detective Robert Jones, who's going to have an awesome amount to say on anti-heroes because, as some of you may know, he actually has a background as a comic artist. Carrow Brown, who's always fantastic, and also Audrey Henley and Falk. So check out the playlist of all of the anti-hero videos. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Thanks so much for watching. And don't forget to subscribe and ding that little bell so you'll be notified every time I post a brand new video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.